This is very skew. This is Groundeffected. My name is Brent, and welcome to that time you couldn't get your prints to stick to your bed. In this video, I'm going to show you how I painted this Assassin's Creed model, which I found upon the internet. I will leave a link in the description for this model if you would like to download it and print it and paint it for yourself. Also, if you're going down there to look for the link, you might as well click like and possibly click subscribe. And if you're there as well, leave a comment, because this helps Uncle Algie, the rhythm, to push my video a little bit further, and perhaps more people can see and learn the same tips and tricks that you are learning. And without any more nonsense, let's just get straight into the video. I'm actually still questioning my choice of using this surface primer because I don't actually think it works as great as it appears to work, but I'll get back to you on that one in a couple more videos from now. First off, I'm going to start off by sanding off all the marks that came from the 3D printer. Yes, they look like they don't have marks, but unfortunately there are marks in certain places. Sometimes the fit isn't perfect and you do need to go in. I try and use a really sharp knife because this really helps to cut off some of the resin, and then once it's all been cut up and dusted off, I'm then going to start painting down my base layers, or essentially in this case I'm going to use a primer and then start on my base layers. For this specific model, I actually kind of did an attempt at a zenithal. At first what I was trying to do was test whether this contrast paint, which is apothecary white, would actually be white, but it's not white, so I scrapped that idea. And I then actually went back in and started to add the real color of the cloak and coat and everything. I started off with skeleton bone, which is kind of a parchmenty kind of color, and then I highlighted that with bleach bone. I didn't go anywhere near white because I was going to use white later in some highlight areas. Once I had made sure I'd got the volumes kind of right for the flowing of the cloak and the cape and everything, I then decided I needed to add a little bit more dirt to it. It also needed a little bit more richer color. It was just a bit too white. So I added in this wash. I sprayed it from the bottom, just sort of from where the shadows are. This obviously creates a little bit more depth and just gives it a bit more visual interest. I then started to base coat everything. I used Sagor Brown, which is a contrast paint. The reason why I use this Sagor Brown a lot is just because its coverage is really great. Most of the time, if you paint it over an area that has kind of got a shade to it already, it will almost take that shape of the shade, but more importantly, it just has really good coverage, and I just really like to use it. In this piece there are a couple of different brown areas, and I don't want to make everything the same brown, so I'm going to start off, like I said, with the Sagor Brown, and then I'm going to actually move on to a different brown for other parts of it. This is just to create a little bit more visual interest so that it's not completely just one color the whole way through. A lot of the main areas like the boots and the satchel and the straps and things like that, I used Sagor Brown. I felt like it needed to have a little bit of a different brown throughout the piece so that it wasn't too monotone essentially. The only problem I have with this other brown that I chose is that it is a little bit more transparent, so this meant that I had to do a couple layers over it. I think it ended up only being 2 layers, but it still means I had to paint it twice. I used Flesh Terror's Red for all the red areas, and again, this is another paint that has pretty good coverage. It's not amazing, but it is a little bit transparent, so it kind of does show a little bit of the pre-shade underneath it. Not that it really helps in some of the areas that I was painting it in, but it definitely has a little bit more of a textured look to it, especially over dark and light patches. For the skin tone, all I did was lay down a base layer of a reddish flesh at the bottom of everything, and I'll come back to that later and I will give it a little bit of a highlight. It is mostly covered by the shroud, so it's going to be quite a dark tone. While I'm doing this, I'll use my airbrush to dry layers just so that I don't get my hand into wet paint while I'm working. I don't know what you call this thing around his waist, but I painted that red. That thing around his waist went red, and then I ended up adding a brown to the straps that hold the thing on his waist on. But before I did that, I painted all the stripes that are going around his cloak or friggin' coat, whatever you want to call this thing. I gave them a little bit of a red inside of them. And then I went back to all the metallic parts with a silver. This is a bright silver from Ammo by Mig. It works really great. I think it's aluminium color, but it is a really bright silver. It's not too shiny, but it's good enough to go through all the little studs on the armor and all the metal pieces. I then dry brushed some of the brown areas because they were just way too flat. So I went in with a slightly lighter brown and I dry brushed those. And yes, I do work a little bit crazy, so I did that in between doing all the silver. Like I said, I never really changed the order of these videos. All I do is I cut them up as they go, I speed them up, and I deliver it to you as I painted the model. So this is exactly my process. It's a little bit backwards and forwards, but sometimes I get bored of doing one thing. Sometimes I think something looks terrible and I need to work on it just so that my brain feels like something is actually happening. There is this really awkward stage when you're painting a model that everything just looks terrible, and I think a lot of people tend to give up at that point. For me, I find it really difficult not to give up, but if you just keep pushing through, it slowly starts to come together. Just trust the process, keep putting paint, keep putting layers, keep putting colors in places. Again, it's just paint. You can literally just change it. If you put the wrong color down, just put the new color over the top. It's not that difficult. Yes, it takes work, but if you take your time and just keep working on it, honest to God, there is an ugly stage, and after the ugly stage, it starts to make a bit more sense. Now coming back to the skins, I just pretty much covered some of the areas and I really loosely airbrushed this. You got to be careful when you airbrush light colors. They do tend to pick up on everything. If it was a darker color, you could kind of just haphazardly airbrush it in and most of the times get away with it. But because it's a lighter color, I do have to be really careful not to get it on any of the other parts of the model. I just built up a highlight going from the darker skin to the lighter skin. Usually I would add a purple and a yellow and all these kind of things, but space wise it's just not really worth it. He is only 1/10 scale, so the detail is not as detailed as a larger model. For the eyes, I used my regular process of just adding a black base coat down. This is just to shape the eyes, and then I use white to give the impression of the white of the eyeball. And then on something this small, I just add a black dot and a little white highlight, and that's where I call it a day. Hopefully you figured out something, or you learned something, or picked up some kind of trick within this video, and it's going to help you in your future painting adventures in the 3D printing world. And if it does, please make sure to leave a comment below and let me know what that is, or if there's anything you would like to see in a future video that you would like me to focus more on, I will do something like that. We're at the end of the video, and I'd like to say thank you to my patrons for all the support. And if you would like to be part of those patrons and be in the private Discord, then the best thing you can do is look in the description for the link. Your support on Patreon helps me keep these lights blinding my eyeballs and make sure that I'm able to make videos the next week and the next week and the next week. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank the latest member of the Patreon that we got this week, and that is Mark Grayson. Thank you so much, my dude. It is because of you and the rest of the patrons that my eyeballs are being burned right now by massive lights in them. If you liked what you saw in the video, make sure to leave a like and leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Also, if you didn't like anything you saw in the video, I'm sorry. There's only one thing you got left to do. Just click dislike and then kindly off. Thank God the fans gave me enough time to record just that little segment.
Damn you laptop fans!